Silicon Slope Summit is Utah's original and longest-running grassroots tech event. It provides entrepreneurs, startups, and leaders the resources and community they need to succeed. With the pandemic behind us, we're excited to bring Silicon Slope Summit back to its original January dates in conjunction with the Sundance Film Festival. We have some unbelievable news. Silicon Slope Summit is free for all Utahns for the first time ever. You heard that right. Silicon Slope Summit is now free. For those looking for an upgraded experience, we are also offering VIP tickets for just $95. Thanks to our partners, sponsors, and government leaders, Silicon Slope Summit is the most accessible tech and startup event in the world. Summit will be hosted in multiple locations throughout the week in both Utah and Salt Lake Valley. There will also be a Startup Alley at Summit this year, where startups and entrepreneurs can meet with investors from around the world to pitch their ideas, receive feedback, and promote what they're building. Of course, we'll be bringing in world-class leaders and speakers, as we have in the past, but we'll also be hosting specific tracks and bringing attendees together for curated networking in a way never done before. You don't want to miss this year's summit. To register, buy VIP tickets, learn about sponsorship, and apply for your startup to be part of Startup Alley, go to siliconslopes.com/summit.
You are somebody who, I believe, flies under the radar, and the impact you've had in the state of Utah and everything that you do and the amazing career you've had and the accomplishments. So I don't know where to start actually with you on like where, when interviewing you, I'm not entirely sure which place we should start, but maybe just tell us like first big win for you.
First big win. First big win was July 6th, 1996.
You have the exact date.
Yeah. That was the day that humans, the internet, money met a new technology. That's what my whole career's been about.
Yeah.
I started a couple little companies before that, which were fun, interesting stories. But the first real kind of intersection of this thing called the internet and making the first product available on the internet. You know, we just took this little interstitial banner, slapped it up in what was then AOL. Just a web form, taking a piece of paper into a screen. 60,000 accounts in day one.
Are you serious?
And we realized this internet thing was real.
What was the name of this company?
Called First USA.
So
it was the best performing financial stock in the world from 92 to 97. And I just happened to be, I'd done some work with them as a student when I was on campus at Utah State, and they were one of my clients. And then I went and did, and I worked with them and got in with this just amazing group of people that in the payments, what would become known as the payment space.
Yeah.
That was mind blowing. No, creating that internet experience was new. Little did people know that there was it was just a web form and that was printed in the back office and rekeyed into another system.
That is so funny.
But it opened up an entirely new world. So that was probably the first real, I was just part of the team. I was a young guy and saw it and experienced it. But that led to then trying to do things for the first time with the intersection of people, money, and technology.
Like you couldn't get enough of that. Like that you're like, I've got to do this.
Yeah, because it went from doing the first product to then we're like, okay, well, wait. Over a period of time, and I just happened to be working with some of the most brilliant people operating in the space. And then we decided to create the world's first internet bank. Clayton Christensen dubbed what would become known as Wingspan as the first internet bank. And again, I'm just a young guy carrying the bags for these brilliant executives. But to be there and to experience that, it was captive within another institution that would become Bank One, that would then become JP Morgan Chase today.
Mm-hmm.
But taking the first product, then to the first real internet bank, then we spun out and we raised $20 million of venture capital and created another internet bank called Juniper. And so those taking a single product, a monoline product, which is, how a lot of startups, especially FinTech they start with a narrow, beautiful experience. Then they expand. And so that's what we did with Wingspan. And then we started Juniper. And Juniper was another internet bank, one of the first early internet banks. And it was right about the time that Elon was starting X.com.
Yeah.
And they were focused on payments.
Where was Juniper? Where were you?
Wilmington, Delaware.
Okay.
There's this kind of epicenter of payments talent emanating out of Wilmington, Delaware. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is that because of the tax thing, or what is that? Like, I know
corporate headquarters, global corporate headquarters. It's the corporate capital of the world.
Yeah.
But then just a couple of payments companies really started there. MBNA, First USA. They became the Coke and Pepsi of competition in the payment space, especially when it came to co-brand and the introduction of a picture on a card, rewards programs on a financial instrument for the first time, doing the very first in-airport marketing where you set up and you get somebody to sign up for a credit card in an airport, doing it at football games, baseball games, the proliferation of leveraging brands that have established relationships, deep relationships and trust with their customers, but want to extend that relationship into a financial instrument, a financial product. Many times the first step into that is through a credit card. You're starting to see that change. The financial industry is now changing quite a bit. So that was those were the early days.
So
first decade.
So when Juniper spins out of Wingspan, you go to Juniper?
Yeah, Wingspan was under Bank One that would become JP Morgan Chase. And then Richard Vague, Jim Stewart, and a number of other people kind of left and raised some money, and we started what would become Juniper, venture backed by Benchmark Capital and Bill Gurley and the team. $20 million raised. It was the first time any financial services company had ever worked with IDEO, the industrial design firm. So it was very much focused on how you bring this human experience and technology together in a full service internet bank. And that is today, started as Juniper. It is today the sixth largest credit card issuer in the United States under the brand of Barclays, because after 5 years, we sold it to Barclays. And so that first kind of decade of the career was back on the East Coast, payments related, very innovative, super high growth companies. And then we sold the business, and that opened the door to the next chapter.
Yeah, that is incredible. Why do they change their names so often? It seems like in financial and banking, like the names are always changing. I guess that's true everywhere, huh? But for some reason, it's more noticeable to me when banks do it.
It isn't so much the names changing as the fact that you have 20,000 banks around the world today. That's consolidating and will continue to consolidate until you get to maybe hundreds of banks. But the United States alone has, depending on how you define a financial institution, a bank, there's between 5,000 to 6,000 banks in the United States. And most of the biggest banks are an amalgamation of acquisitions over time. So they get acquisitions lead to acquisitions. And so that's why a lot of institutions change their brands. In this case, though, with Juniper was a de novo startup, just like you see many of the startups here in this amazing ecosystem we have in Utah.
Yeah. So what did you do after that?
So we had 2 kids at the time.
Living in Delaware?
Living in Delaware.
Okay.
I'd been there a decade. My wife joined me 4 years into it. So we'd been married about 6 years. 2 kids. I just graduated from business school on the side while growing this startup, and had a successful exit. And then the acquiring company, this big multinational British bank, what they referred to as a Quaker and white shoe British bank, said, we'd like one of the team to come to England. Well, I'd spent 2 years over in Norway, had moved around a lot as a kid. I liked change. My wife's from Utah too.
Yeah.
Not as thrilled about the change and the change that would come, but I told her, look, it's 6 months. Let's go celebrate. We've sold the business. We got 2 kids. Let's just go celebrate for 6 months in London and the UK and live up the experience. 6 months turned into 14 years. We spent 2 years in the UK, 4 years in Dubai. Amazing stories and experiences in Dubai. 5 years back in London. And then 3 years in Madrid, Spain.
And this is all for Barclays?
No, the first 3
The
were
first
Barclays.
3? Okay.
Last one was so that was a big British bank.
Yeah.
And then the last one was with BBVA, one of the biggest Spanish banks. And it's really interesting to contrast the experiences of American institutions, headquartered institutions, British, Spanish. And if you look at the makeup of their businesses, their customers, so much of it still connects back to the old empires.
Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's actually, that's way cool.
Yeah. So for Barclays, it was a presence. They had a global presence, big across Europe, big across, obviously the UK. But then they were the biggest banks in their British colonies in Africa. Barclays had been in Africa in Ghana for 90 years. And Ghana as an independent country had existed for 50, as an example. So experiencing that kind of global trade, global exposure across markets and operating in global businesses at scale, just the natural learnings you get walking into the office, and you got a call with Ghana, then you got a call with Indonesia, then you got a call with Russia, and then Japan, and working in global markets like that, and understanding the maturity of markets and what works in one and how you can take it to another.
Mm-hmm.
That was fascinating.
Yeah, that's way interesting. What did you learn about humanity? Are we more similar than we think, or are we as divided as they say we are?
I think there's a lot of, when you boil it down to a very human level, yeah, we're very, very similar.
Yeah.
But the cultural nuances and what people place value on is different in each market. Just a simple example of, in many of the African markets, if you walk into a meeting, a board meeting, or into an executive meeting, or just working with the teams, it's really important to shake everybody's hand and go around person by person, shake everybody's hand, look them in the eye and say hello. Culturally, in Latin markets, it's a little bit more flexible on when the timing of when a meeting may start. But equally, it's really, really important to get to a relationship level of trust before getting into business. And that's really important when building really lasting relationships with people that you can build on over time. And some cultures are more comfortable making decisions that translate into execution than others. But at a real human level, when it comes down to a nice dinner, whether in Spain that dinner starts at 10 or 11 or even later PM.
That's wild.
Versus 5, 6 PM in the US, it's quite different.
Yeah. Tell me about Dubai. Why is Dubai so incredible?
Well, so we moved to Dubai in 2007 to 2011 is when we were there. So right during the financial crisis. And for the first 18 months, it felt like, for the first 2 years, it felt like Dubai would actually be immune to the financial crisis. So the rest of the world was going through this thing called the financial crisis. Whereas in Dubai, real estate was still appreciating 40% per annum. The most cranes in the world were either in China or they're in Dubai. And there are these, what in the banking world is referred to as money center or trade centers.
Mm-hmm.
And Dubai became the gateway from the world into the Middle East and as a cultural kind of meeting point.
Mm-hmm.
But Sheikh Mohammed is one of the most brilliant innovators of the history of the world, I think, in that he saw that in the state of the United Arab Emirates, there are 7 states, and Dubai is one of them. Abu Dhabi is another. Abu Dhabi is the rich one, or the one with the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. And Dubai, that's because they have the oil. Dubai was running out of oil, and Sheikh Mohammed realized that. And so he created a destination, a trade destination and a vacation destination for Southeast Asia, for Eastern Europe, and from Africa as a meeting point. And he created this so people would fly from Accra, Ghana, or from Nairobi, Kenya to Dubai to get Legos for their kids because they could. And Sheikh Mohammed created world first class living. And what that they've created as a city and as a destination's pretty remarkable, but they've retained a lot of the culture of the local Emiratis as they refer to them.
Like you can't drink alcohol there, right?
You can.
Oh, you can.
You have to have a license.
Oh, I was going to say.
And that was fascinating to be there during Ramadan. And, you know, the Starbucks or the McDonald's or the restaurants would just have curtains up so that if you were partaking of a beverage or eating during Ramadan, which is a fast from sun up till sundown, you were allowed to do that, but you were asked to have respect for others that were practicing their...
Don't flaunt it or whatever.
Yeah. And so you could go behind the curtain and order, but even in the workplace, it was you were requested to be somewhat discreet in how you if you were not fasting during the full 40-day fast that they do. But boy, the iftars to celebrate every night, incredible feasts and bonding experiences with the locals, and many of those that practice the Muslim faith.
Yeah, that's incredible. But Dubai is endlessly fascinating to me.
Yeah, to walk. Our kids went to school. Our kids are great skiers in the state of Utah now, but our kids learned to ski in Dubai.
Oh, that's cool.
So our kids would go to school and then walk, or my wife would take them to the mall and they'd learn to ski indoors for 90 minutes once a week, year round.
That's cool.
But what's fascinating about Dubai and the leadership of Dubai is constantly wanting to do the next big thing. And there's a lot that can be learned from just pushing the boundaries in every industry, in everything that they do. The world's first 7-star hotel, right? Who creates? There's no such thing as a 7-star hotel, but they created the world's first 7-star hotel. And there's other great examples. You know, we were there. My father-in-law, a great man, and my wife was a state rodeo champion here. So we grew up with horses, and my father-in-law came to visit us, and family came to visit us in Dubai. And so I thought, okay, we can take him to the world's richest horse race, which is in Dubai. Or we can take him out, and had a lot of great cultural experiences. But I said, let's take him to the camel races. So we went to the camel races. We show up at the camel races, and the kids are sitting on the roof of our SUV, blonde-haired, tow-headed kids. And after the races finish, because you could literally just pull up and park next to the track. After the races finish, somebody pulls up across the track in a white X5, gets out in the local dress, and he just shouts at us across the track. And he says, "Would your kids like to come see my camels?" And we said, "Oh, that sounds cool." Father-in-law, mother-in-law are there. And so we get the kids in the SUV, and he says, "Just follow me." So he's driving on one side of the track. We're driving on the other. We drive back around for over a mile. to what was back to his eventually compound. We pull into the compound and we go into his motorba, which is the kind of hosting area where they have dates and coffees and that kind of stuff to host. We sit down and my father-in-law and he are talking about their trophies in Western rodeo. It's the belt buckles. He was showing us some of his camel trophies. And he then spent 3 hours personally picking up our kids. And as we pulled into the compound, we realized that this person had some money and he had about 300 camels. And he started taking my kids around and he would personally lift them up and put them on the camels and they walked the kids around. And then we were about 2.5 hours into it when we realized, and he shared with us, that his last name was Maktoum. Maktoum is the ruling family of Dubai.
Oh, wow.
And he just spent 3 hours talking to us about how they loved Americans and how grateful he was that we were in his country. And while he had a lot of people that could have helped, he personally took our kids and walked us around and we were just total strangers.
That's cool.
And we had lots of experiences like that of the locals just welcoming us. And that was one example of Dubai.
What do you do after you get out of the big bank business?
Well, when I was in Dubai, that's when blockchain Bitcoin was really heating up, and a lot of it was heating up in Africa, especially in Kenya. And there was the world's largest mobile money service of sending money over mobile phones had started in Kenya.
Why is that?
Because people wanted to be able to exchange money, but they weren't exchanging money. They were exchanging mobile phone credits. So minutes on a mobile phone became the currency. And so as you saw, it was called Safaricom, and M-Pesa had just exploded in Kenya. And so there's 16,000 plus merchants that started to they just started to accept mobile phone credits for a loaf of bread or for a piece of, for any kinds of goods. And it became to the point where 40% of the GDP of this country, Kenya, was going through M-Pesa. And then you had the Bitcoin and the blockchain connection to it. And so at that point, having done the early days of the internet, seeing the next wave was going to be mobile, ended up building the first mobile money service in Europe. And that was person to person using a phone number as a proxy for a bank account to be able to send money from one person to another. And then we created the world's first FinTech accelerator in London.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun. And that was coupled with the big financial institution as a way to drive innovation into a big 200,000 plus employee organization and to intersect innovators and disruptors and with a recognition that the best thing that you can do for a startup isn't to give money. Financial capital is great. Venture capital is great. Mentoring is fantastic. The most valuable thing you can give to a startup, and this is how I met a lot of the founders in Utah when I wasn't in Utah, is to become their customer. And so we tried to unlock a $2.5 billion technology budget every year. So can we take a little part of that and point it towards the startup ecosystem? Because during that period of time, after the financial crisis, Europe was dead. There was 0 companies in the IPO pipeline. 0. And there was this inferiority complex to London and the UK. Potentially, why is innovation happening in the United States? It's not happening here. We've got all the universities. We've got all the people. We've got industry. So we did a lot of stuff to try and connect that within the ecosystem of London. Did a lot with the government, with Boris Johnson, who had become Prime Minister of the UK, and others. So that was some time back in London. And then the number one banker in the world in Spain called. And there's something magical about working with people at a level that are recognized as the best in the world at what they do.
Yeah.
or being the best in the world in something. And we did that in Spain for a while as a family, didn't speak Spanish. And then we came home. And we came home for family and for very personal reasons to get back to Utah.
And real quick, on the accelerator front, why don't we have something like that in Utah? And what makes a great accelerator?
We've explored it. We've talked with a number of, and there've, I think you did something way back in the day. There's some ingredients for doing a startup in the right way. And again, the biggest intersection between how you run the startup, the intake, whether it's Y Combinator, Techstars, 500 startups, whoever it might be. The selection of those is important, and it's all about team. But the biggest metric on the success of an accelerator is if the startups can emerge out of that 110-day program, depending on how it's designed. Most of them are about 110 days, with a contract with a customer that can help them scale.
That's what YC is brilliant at.
Yeah.
YC is really good at that.
They are.
Accelerators are hard. And I mean, what would you say? It's like YC, Techstars. You mentioned 500 stars. 500 stars still around?
Yeah, they're still around.
I didn't even know that. But it's an interesting way to start a company. Anyways, what did you learn running that?
Oh, there's a physical transformation of kind of legacy leadership executives that are operating these big multi-billion-dollar companies. When they see their business being disrupted by somebody sitting across the table from them, that's a 24-year-old young woman that has 3 years and maybe not even in the industry, but has come up with this brilliant idea and is just a force of nature and tenacity in wanting to disrupt the space. I'll never forget, we had the head of corporate banking. You know, this is an individual that has the nicest house on the Cape in France on the shore as a vacation home, and interacts with these huge multinational companies and executives all over the world, and runs a multi-billion-dollar business. And he walks into this space that we've created, a physical space as a gathering space for these companies to work together and for us to meet. And to literally see the physical, physical transformation that came over when it clicked, and saw the disruption that was there and the contrast to what was being operated with tens of thousands of employees at scale across businesses is magical. And to see that cultural transformation is pretty cool. But then to see companies that have come out like Chainalysis and Alloy and others that are multi-billion-dollar startups that have started with just an idea, and then the formation of that team, and see what they've been able to build. That's really cool. And to see remnants of that, examples of that also here in this ecosystem, which is what I love to see. That's really exciting at the point of inflection we are as an ecosystem. It's pretty magical.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you come to Utah. What do you go to work on?
So we moved back. So for a couple reasons, for family and stuff. And there's I'd had the privilege while overseas of helping build some of the best mobile experiences for money, and recognize that, especially with COVID solved the fact that you could essentially do everything you do in a bank branch on a mobile device. And so I've spent the last 4 years really diving deep into the technology that sits below the experience. So when Clint taps on the glass and he wants to open an account at some financial institution, that there's nothing below the glass. There's nothing there. But somehow a message is sent somewhere to open an account, which is so foreign to previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
And the technology that actually enables that, whether it's from security or from making those actual interactions intelligent and the use of data, the actual functional elements of how do you do that in a way that can be regulated by a federal oversight committee. So that's what I spent the last 4 or 5 years looking at those technologies, and I run a company now called Galileo that does that. And the next 7 to 10 years is going to be a massive transformation in that technology that enables the experiences that everybody kind of takes for granted when you tap on the glass and all of a sudden you can see exactly how much money you do have.
That actually is kind of wild.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Galileo is incredible. It's wild. What is the future of money, though?
The future of money will be there's kind of 3 phases to the evolution of money and how companies design experiences around money. The first of those is just simply making it digitally available.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a shocking statistic is one of the world's largest banks, $70 billion market cap company, 200 million customers around the world. Today, only 55% of their products and services are even available on a mobile device.
Today?
Versus Nubank out of Brazil, 100% digital, and they now have 100 million customers. It's 100% digital. And you contrast those businesses, it's pretty interesting to contrast them as you look through those metrics. So the first phase has to be digital. It will be digital. Now that'll be digital assisted, DIY, or do it together, depending on which model you're looking at. The second phase of it is how do you make those interactions intelligent? So it's not just a dumb interaction that you ask me for the same information I've always wanted over time. That's intuitive for us. But the next real phase, and we're well into those 2 phases. The next real phase is where AI comes into play, and you can't leverage AI unless you've got the right data.
Mm-hmm.
But AI will dramatically improve the end user experience and the way companies operate to help you as an individual manage your money, as well as companies manage their money. Things that have been manual in the past, that have taken multiple steps, will be seamless. They'll be real time. They will be immediate and won't require thought or decisions. The greatest stress in people's life is money.
Mm-hmm.
And we as humans learn through behavioral economics is that most people don't like making decisions, especially when it comes to the biggest stress in their life. So we're moving to a point where a lot of those decisions can and will be removed for us by leveraging best-in-class capabilities and technologies. But an example of where are we heading? You could be driving down, we were talking about Tesla before. You could be driving down in your Tesla or your smart vehicle that's taking you from one destination to the other. That's what your financial institution will do. It will move you from one institution to another, but those will intersect while you're driving. Let's say you and the family decide you wanted to drive up to Ogden Valley, and you're just driving around Ogden Valley after a good day up at Snow Basin.
Mm-hmm.
You decide, maybe we should get a place up here. You drive past one of the local places, or you simply say to your vehicle, and let's call your AI Clint. You say, hey, Clint, find me a home in Ogden Valley. And through voice interaction with a computer, you will have 3 options that are already pre-vetted based on your financial affordability, based on the timeline it would take to close, knowing you because they've got a view of your full financial life, and say to you and your wife sitting next to you, say, there are 3 homes that we found that are 1.5 miles apart. All of them would go to Snowcrest Middle School or to Valley Elementary School. All 3 would be affordable. All 3 could qualify for mortgages from these 3 financial institutions. I can have the offer submitted with a tap on the on the glass because it will likely require some form of recognition. Voice print might work, but it might require an actual tap on the glass. Would you like me to submit the offer today? Yes. Within 30 seconds, you could have a response back saying the offer is accepted. Within then another 30 seconds, the 123 signatures required on a mortgage application and on a closing documentation could be closed in a matter of 90 seconds.
That's wild. How far away are we from that?
Not far.
Interesting. What do you make of the rise of BRICS?
What do you
mean? Is the dollar always going to be the world's reserve currency? Or, with Russia and China and Saudi Arabia and Iran and all these people kind of creating their own? That's kind of fascinating, right?
It is. The underlying there's the currency itself, or the token, or the value that is exchanged. And again, looking back at him, even in M-Pesa, and the exchange of mobile minutes is a form of value and or currency, right?
That's actually fascinating.
And so there has always been an exchange of value, and whether that value is regulated by a government is interesting. And again, the study of Kenya is interesting because the currency, the notes, the dollars, or shillings, or whatever the currency is of the local, is usually issued by the local government.
Yeah,
and that is a form of currency in a local government. But it's also interesting to look at these global currencies, whether it's crypto and or other things, move that up a level. And the exchange of those currencies are valued based on the exchange of the individuals operating in that individual market. And there are major players around the world that are influencing that. So you mentioned some of the countries. Some countries are accepting those currencies. Others are still kind of waiting to see. But the underlying technology that is the blockchain is fascinating. Just the computer science associated with it is fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
And that will enable a lot of the experience we just talked about in the car. But the actual currencies themselves that sit on top of it, and the global powers and how they react to that, will be fascinating to see how that plays out.
I know. Most likely the dollar's still the reserve currency 50 years from now, but it's not guaranteed.
No, it's not.
And what Bitcoin does, and any cryptocurrencies like it, but particularly Bitcoin, is you kind of don't need a country at that point. That's like that. I think the reason why it's so fascinating is governments exist primarily because they have a monopoly on currency and guns. So you can kind of control things. Now they'll probably still have the gun thing, but if the dollar is worth nothing and we're all doing Bitcoin, that changes America, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't see that happening. But
I don't either.
It's an interesting world to consider. But states, counties, cities, and countries exist because people gather together. And in our great country, and again, having lived outside of this amazing country and this amazing state, we have a deep appreciation for what we have.
Yeah.
And what is truly special here. And the ability of people to organize to create our own form of government is what's amazing about this country.
Yeah.
And as long as we as the people have a voice in being able to govern and to establish that governance and establish our leaders, it's magical.
Yeah.
And not everywhere has that.
Almost
not
nowhere.
Everybody gets to experience that. And we're very blessed to be able to have that today.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Then we have the Federal Reserve, which is its whole...
Which has deep roots in the state of Utah. No, I don't know how many people know this, but the Federal Reserve was started by Mayor Eccles. Mayor Eccles is a Utahn. the Eccles family. It was the Fed was started, and I shouldn't. Spencer and the family should talk about this more than I. But the state of Utah punches way above our weight when it comes to the monetary system of the United States. There are those that would say that that Utah is the fourth most influential state in the United States because of the monetary system, the companies that are headquartered, the fact that we have the industrial loan corporations here. 95% of the industrial loan corporation balances are in the state of Utah. We have the Fed that was started here, and then you have the tech ecosystem. So the deep roots that we have in the financial industry in the state, coupled with our deep roots in technology. I think you had Blake on here talking about the deep roots that we have from Novell and We're Perfect and that. The intersection of those in the state is what's really fueling some amazing FinTech startups.
Yeah.
You've got just within the last couple of years, and I'm not going to be able to name all of them, but you've got Steve Smith, Nick Thomas, and the team at Finicity exiting to MasterCard. $1 billion exit.
Huge exit.
Big exit.
Didn't get nearly enough play.
No, but that's a unicorn exit.
Yeah.
And I forget how many millionaires they made out of the angel investors that they opened up and invited into the ecosystem. The Divvy team, Blake and his team.
Have you ever seen a FinTech company built that fast with that fast of an exit with that big of an exit?
It's pretty remarkable. There aren't many like it.
I mean, I think it was like 5 years.
Yeah, it was remarkable. I remember sitting with Blake when he was drawing it up on his whiteboard, and what he and the broader team did there is pretty remarkable. But then you have Clay Wilkes and Clay and the Wilkes brothers and what they mean to the payments ecosystem in the United States. Clay built up the Galileo business that I now run, and I'm fortunate to have been taking it over from when he founded it, and that was a $1.3 billion exit.
Yeah, the Wilkes.
And to see that kind of that cycle of scale, businesses scaling up to a point that they can exit, the next phase of our ecosystem has to be keeping the companies and keeping the headquarters here.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of what I'm focused on and trying to help Utah as we move forward.
How do we do that?
A lot of it comes down to connecting the key influencers in the ecosystem across government, industry, academia, and the startup ecosystem, everybody working together and having great founders like we have here. I mean, what you and the founders of Silicon Slopes have done, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
The fact that we have founders in the state, Josh, Ryan, and others, Todd and others, that have stood up and said, we're going to keep making this place special, investing their own money to build ecosystem and having the vision of what that means for the ecosystem and doing it for the good of the ecosystem and keeping companies in Utah. Yeah. It starts by some of the leaders keeping companies in Utah. We've kept Galileo in Utah.
Yeah.
Ryan's kept Qualtrics here. Josh is keeping Domo here. Vivint's still here, right? So keeping these companies in Utah and scaling them up so that the Novels of the world become the next Microsofts.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? That's the next stage. That's the next story of the Utah ecosystem, I think.
Do you think that company has already been started, the one that will be the next Microsoft? Or do you think the soil's not exactly ready for something like that yet?
With what we can see is happening in this ecosystem, it's very likely one of those companies is already started. I don't know exactly who it is.
Yeah.
But it's very possible it's already here. And it all comes down to the appetite to grow and scale from Utah out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things the Olympics is doing and that a lot of the great leaders in the state are doing is bringing the world to Utah. One thing COVID did was open up the Utah talent to the world.
Oh, yeah.
The world's discovered Utah.
Yeah.
So how do we keep Utah companies in Utah? Because there's some stats that once a company's acquired and headquarters becomes a second headquarters or a second office, you lose a notable part of the job.
Yeah.
And so keeping headquarters here and having that as an example is pretty critical for us.
Yeah. And having like people like Reed Hastings buying mountains and, all that type of stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like it really is. Yeah. 2012, 2013, we couldn't get too much attention, but we've got all the attention we could want
it's changed.
right now.
I mean, you just look at the talent that's wanting to move here or has moved. I just look at my own business. The level of talent that wants to be part of this ecosystem, wants to have a home here, and look at the construction that's happening in the state, look at the health of our economy. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it really is special. Why are we so good at FinTech here? Because that's a new thing, relatively. I mean, obviously we have a long history of it that you laid out there, but we've typically only been good at SaaS. FinTech is really interesting.
We have, but Utah has deep history in doing service in the financial services industry. So whether it was call centers or whether it was marketing, Utah has deep history in that. There are a lot of financial institutions that have had their headquarters here, have had offices here. And then as the discovery of the amazing talent we have here, and the convergence of our deep roots with our financial institutions that we have and the amazing tech talent we have, that's translated into the creation of pretty amazing businesses.
What about
and SaaS naturally requires data.
Yeah.
And leverage so much of what we've done and the businesses that have been built has leveraged data to be able to create the future.
That's a part of Qualtrics' story that doesn't get talked about enough. Is just how much data they had.
It's amazing.
And, how much data that's obviously worth. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, they'd accumulated a ton of data over the 20 years to have really, really impressive insights over consumers and the experiences they want, all that type of stuff. I find that fascinating. What about like our venture community? Is that, how are we doing there? And obviously, part of this is like every top VC firm in the country and in the world is here too. But what about our local ones?
They weren't 10 years ago.
No, they weren't. Not even close.
No.
Like Josh tells a story of trying to raise money for Omniture, and he told him it was like a very prominent VC, and he's out in San Francisco, and he tells him where he's from, and the VC just stops talking to him and walks away.
Doesn't happen today.
That's how it used to be.
Yeah, it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
We have some great local VC firms that have backed some very successful unicorns and have had some very successful exits, and they're reinvesting in the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And getting that cycle is magical.
Yeah.
That's great. And we've got some great leaders that are doing that. We've also got some of the biggest VC firms in the world and private equity firms in the world and private family offices. Don't underestimate the private family offices or the angel networks. We've got really good angel networks.
Are investing as much as
they are.
Most funds, if not more.
They are. And so we've got the VC, you got the PEs, but the family offices and the angel networks.
Yeah, tell me about that, because I actually don't experience a strong angel network. So I'm missing something.
There's some really interesting networks, whether from Park City or Salt Lake and others across the state that are putting their capital, whether it's ticket sizes and investments from anywhere from 10, 25,000 to 250,000.
That's sweet.
Individuals have different tolerance levels of and appetites. Some are more structured and kind of they have their very structured approach to it. Some are willing to just take bets on founders off a gut. And that's magical. We've got some really successful individuals and angels that are willing to take the bet on the next person because they had someone take a bet on them.
Yeah.
And they want to pay it forward. And it's magical.
Yeah.
And we've got a really good grassroots kind of angel network. It's building, but especially you see that a lot in the family offices too, wanting to invest in.
They're super active.
They are.
The family offices are unbelievably active. It kind of freaks me out how active they are. It's so awesome. It's like we gained 4 or 5 funds.
It's pretty exciting.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's very so what does the next 5 years look like for you, for Galileo?
So Galileo today has about 200 million end users on our platform. We're a rule of 40 company, operating across 16 countries and about 1,600 employees. And we're headquartered in Utah.
So cool.
And we've gone from 3 countries to 16 countries in 3 years. And the goal is to make it a global company, a global technology company that serves financial services. Why stop there?
Yeah.
There's really, really exciting developments that we can see in that convergence of technology and shaping how businesses interact with money and individuals. And then helping to scale businesses, especially Utah businesses, and helping them go global.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, when we started this conversation, you are a very underrated member of our community. The things that you have done is just so incredible. And you need to grab the microphone more, man, because we can learn a lot from you.
Well, we've got amazing people here. When I was overseas, we'd have a $2 billion technology budget, and in a couple of companies we worked at. And I remember reading articles about what was happening in the Utah ecosystem. And I wasn't in the Utah ecosystem. I was in London and Singapore and Cape Town and Tel Aviv, and helping build ecosystem overseas. But then reading about the Utah boys and what they were doing. And it was interesting. Every summer we'd come home, I'd take a couple of days, and I told my wife I just wanted to network with the ecosystem here and connect with some of the ecosystem. And I remember sending notes to Josh and Ryan and some of the Utah boys I was reading about. I didn't know them, but draft up a note that say, "Hey Josh, I run a $2 billion technology budget for a global financial institution. I'm a Utah boy. I'll be home for 3 days. Can I meet and become your customer?" And it's amazing what that'll do to creating relationships. There's a number of people didn't even respond.
Kidding?
No. And all we wanted to do was become their customer. But that's where it comes down to the ecosystem that we have here in Utah. It's very open. It's very connected, and people want to help others. That's what's magical.
Yeah.
And
so cool.
We've got a very pay it forward culture.
Have you ever seen an ecosystem like it? What would be a comparable outside of the United States?
Yeah, a lot of the African ecosystems, Cape Town and others are. When studying ecosystems, there's a couple of companies, the Case family that founded AOL, and a couple of others, Kauffman Foundation and others, have studied ecosystems. They studied the U.S. ecosystems. They studied the cities.
Steve Case did that whole bus tour and stuff. That was very cool. Yeah.
So I did a panel with Steve Case at Obama's visit to Nairobi, and we talked about this. And the biggest thing, and we did this in London, there's a group called the Big Innovation Center in London that was formed and literally studied ecosystems. Again, 0 companies in the IPO pipeline back then. What's the one thing that separates an ecosystem from others? And the number one thing, and it is measurable, is connectivity and pay it forward. So this thing that people talk about, going to Silicon Valley and you meet with somebody for a coffee and then you walk out of it with 7 connections because people just want to connect you with other people and they've got connections and like, oh, your business sounds like his business. It might be like yours. You guys should talk. But then this partnership might lead to this and those degrees of separation and the network thinking and network connectivity that amplifies things. That's magical. Yeah. We're building that here. And a lot of what Silicon Slopes is doing is opening that up.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you're on the outside looking into those networks, it's not a fun place to be.
Well, that was the hard thing. That's what I love. What you guys are doing. How do you get in there? That was always the hard thing. Like early 2010, 2011, it's like, how does somebody get in there? Like, we know things are happening there, but how do you get in? And how do we kind of pull all of that incredible experience and knowledge and mentorship out of this incredible group? And the fact that they did it, the fact that they got in a room together and they were like, we're going to build this nonprofit that we're here right now. It's pretty remarkable.
It's awesome.
It's pretty remarkable.
It's someday there'll be a case study if there hasn't been already written on it. But, if there is somebody watching this or that attends the Silicon Slope Summit and sits there and looks at the person talking on stage or sees you interviewing some world-class individual and it feels like fairy tale, like it's too distant from me, I'd say shatter that thinking immediately.
Not in Utah. You can get there.
You can get there. I mean, I watch some of these young college students. I watch my son. And sending a simple note to a CEO of a company on LinkedIn or reaching out to a CEO, you'd be surprised how many CEOs of companies, publicly listed companies, privately listed companies, will take a call with you.
Yeah.
Or will create an internship for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. If they see you're hungry and just want to learn and build the thing, no question. No question.